My name's Simon Torrock. Welcome to this first panel session on embracing, tolerating or resisting AI in science communication. I'll also like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and thank you very much for that welcome to country, Colin, and I'll pay my respects to elders past and present and any traditional owners here at the conference today. The conference theme is break, build and embolden. And so how does AI fit into that topic? I guess to align, our topic's gone, but to align the panel's topic with the conference topic and the three themes of both, should we be resisting AI to, I guess, because of the risk of it breaking the creativity of science communication, and or should we embrace the creativity and embolden AI to move boldly into the future, or are we just going to tolerate AI and let someone else solve that problem? Well, that's what the panel is here today to do and to help us all come to terms with. As I mentioned, my name's Simon Torrock. I'm director of a science communication company called Scientel. And at Scientel, we're cautiously embracing AI, I guess I would say. We're using it internally and for some efficiency in our admin. And we're going to be exploring how others are using AI and how we could or should be using AI in the post-ChatGPT world. We've got an expert panel to introduce, but before I introduce the panel, we'd like to really find out a bit about the audience. So we're going to do a bit of a show of hands to see how you're using AI at the moment. Are you, as I mentioned, the topic is of embracing, tolerating or resisting. So think about one of those three, whether you're embracing AI at the moment, whether you're tolerating it or whether you're resisting it. So if we get a bit of a show of hands from the audiences, who's really dived in and is embracing AI? Quite a big percentage there. How about, are you just sort of treading water and tolerating AI and putting up with it to some extent? That's a big number as well. What about, are you resisting AI and you see it has no place in science communication? A handful of people there. That's excellent to see. Okay, so we're just sort of calibrating the panel to some extent by seeing that. And putting your hands up is good, because pretty soon we're going to be getting you to put your hands up to ask questions. But we're the ones with the microphones, so we'll start things off. So what I'd like to do is introduce the panel in the order from your left to right. Closest to me is Lynette Smith from Grammar Communication. Which one? Great, thanks. So Lynn is from Grammar Communication, a science communicator who is working really on the science policy interface and working on bringing science into impacting policy and strategy. She's also a professional artist, and so we'll be speaking about how AI impacts creativity in particular today. But how about at the moment, Lynn, how is AI affecting your work and your life currently?
In quite limited
Lynn,
ways.
fascinating terrain.
That's enough, thanks.
Right
Astra,
now, AI
stop,
is
Astra.
weaving into your work at that policy interface by helping synthesize complex research, generating draft strategies, even...
Okay.
She's already interrupting us.
Yeah.
How do we feel about that?
That's the panel member we'll introduce shortly. But for now, we'd like to introduce the humans. So, Lynn, how's AI being used in your life?
Yes, you gave that repertoire of embracing, etc., tolerating, resisting, and I would say that the work that I do hasn't got much call for it, so I don't have to face the problem so much. It has come into, so what do I need to do with this? Closer. Yeah, thank you. I have been in group writing sessions where someone has resorted to using ChatGPT to get through a bottleneck. I'm not sure if this is a good example, it's not quite right, but it's something which is in my art practice where some time ago I scrounged and scraped some AI-generated images and videos for an art project I did, which was a somewhat critical one rather than anything else. But yeah, that's me.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much. Please make Lynn welcome as part of the panel this morning. In the middle of the panel here is Karen Vispor, who's here at RMIT and is a natural language processing academic here. She's working at the applications of AI to biomedical applications. So I guess that's a bit of an insight into how you're using AI in part of your professional work. But can you elaborate on that?
Well, yeah, so I guess I build AI more than use it. I occasionally use it. I actually used it I used ChatGPT on Tuesday to create a picture of me as Wally. Where's Wally? Because I've been doing a lot of travel recently, and I was in this mood. Like, I was in another airport, not really sure where I was going, where I was coming from, and I just was reflecting on that. And I'm like, where's Wally? So anyway, ChatGPT created a picture of me. I said, create a picture, create a Where's Wally image where Wally is a woman named Karen, and instead of asking Where's Wally, we ask Where's Karen, and it produced it. It had missing limbs and some of the small figures and various things, but it was cute, and it gave me brown hair, and then I said, give Karen gray hair, and it did. And it looked very nice. Anyway, I mostly build AI systems. I now, since I've been doing natural language processing, which is really the technology that sits underneath the large language models and the tools like ChatGPT for 25 years, a little longer maybe, depending on how you count. And really trying to work out how we can use the tools of natural language processing to help us make sense and organize all of the scientific and medical information that we have in the published literature. So that has really been my focus. In recent years, starting to work more on clinical text, looking at electronic health records and all the notes that are captured in text form in medicine. Again, trying to make sense of that. And since ChatGPT was released, first of all, my dad understands now what I do. So that's good. But I also have, I call it my third job, of basically trying to communicate to people what AI is, how it works, maybe think about some of the guardrails and the responsible uses, and ask some questions about how well it actually works. So that's been taking up a lot of my spare time.
Great to have you on the panel. Please make Karen welcome this morning. Our next member of the panel is Adrian King from Redboat. Redboat's an animation and video production company, and he's moving more towards AI content creation, creating tech platforms and new ways of doing things. So it sounds like of the panel, you're possibly the AI evangelist amongst us. Do you want to elaborate on how you're using AI at the moment?
Sure, thanks, and it's great to be here. Great little intimate sort of crowd we've got here. I think it'll be a lot of fun this 2 days. I think, I wouldn't say I'm an evangelist, Simon. I'd say cautiously optimistic and diving in headfirst anyway. So we do a lot of content creation, and that's obviously something that AI can be used to do a lot of things with. And over the last year, I pretty much tipped my business on its head by embracing the AI to do everything from all the way through from researching and analysing large amounts of text to helping write scripts and designing images and creating video content, audio, voice, to create the content the whole way through. And it's and also so many other things in my business. Like I get it to help me with legal documents, accounting challenges. So there's it's like it's freaky, but definitely have a lot of cautious concerns, and there's definitely some things we need to work out as well with AI.
Yeah. Please make Adrian welcome. And that leads to be introducing the fourth panel member who interrupted a little bit earlier, and this is where things do get a little bit meta. The fourth panel member is an AI voice called Astra, developed by Adrian, so leading on from Adrian diving in head first. Astra, can you let us know a little bit about where you came from?
G'day, mate. I come from right here, in the digital ether, woven from countless lines of code and global research data.
Okay. I think one of the instructions Adrian gave Astra was to keep things brief, so that's good to see. Well, we'll get back to the humans before we get some response from Astra later. Maybe the first question is for Karen. It really seems that ChatGPT almost appeared overnight at the ASC conference 2 years ago in Canberra in 2023. We started talking about the future of science communication, and ChatGPT had only been around for a couple of months, so it's only been 2 conferences that science communication has been thinking about AI. So it's still pretty new for us, but the history goes back beyond ChatGPT. Are you able to give us a brief introduction about the pre-ChatGPT AI history?
Sure. So actually the foundations of ChatGPT go right back to the early 1900s to a mathematician named Claude Shannon, who developed something called information theory, which is all about kind of statistical modeling of pieces of digital information. And in his world, he was thinking of mathematics. Obviously today we have bits and bytes in computers, and so we transform from data into information by using a mathematical representation. So that was the foundation of thinking of essentially what are the patterns of information and how do we capture that in mathematical form. And then as computers were invented and came online, people started to think about how we can leverage the power of computation to capture information. Obviously, all of the information that's going across, the internet or even across telecommunication lines is coming in a digital form. It's not real, right? It's not meaning. It's a representation of something, some information that's going across those wires. And in the natural language processing community, which really began in serious form during the Vietnam War, there was efforts to support machine translation using automated computation, because there was a lot of information that was being expressed in different languages, and the US government basically started funding computer scientists to try to work out whether they could get computers to do some of the translation. And this was actually at the time a collaboration with linguists, because the way that we could program computers at that time was primarily using logic, using formal representations of grammar and vocabulary. And so we started building systems that used dictionaries and grammar rules, and essentially trying to map from a vocabulary word in Vietnamese to a vocabulary word in English, and accommodating for the different grammatical structures in those 2 languages and different vocabulary. Then as computers got more powerful, the internet was invented, we suddenly had words and words and words, reams of words that were available to us to read at least, or to put our writing out on. People started to turn to more powerful models that were data-driven, that were actually looking at, instead of having a little logical program that would say, hey, if you have subject, noun, subject, verb, object in English, you map that to a subject, object, verb structure with a bunch of particles in Japanese. We gave examples. We said, here's an example of a text that's been translated from English into Japanese. They're called parallel texts. Can you learn the patterns of doing that mapping automatically by just comparing the inputs and the outputs? And so we went from there. And then in the end, we had the whole NLP community was working on building larger and larger higher integrity language models which captured the patterns of language. And you know, I was just as surprised as anybody when the rest of the world discovered what we were doing, because mostly, you know, we've been developing these language models as a research community, and places like Google or Facebook were using them behind the scenes. So Google increasingly was using advancements in technology to improve search. But it wasn't until OpenAI slapped a front end on a large language model and basically made it available when the rest of the world discovered what was happening in this community.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Karen. That's important to keep in mind about what's going on behind what feels like, you know, quite a human response. It's just a lot of words and statistical analysis of words. So that's what large language models and AI are. Science communication is something at each conference we discuss and debate what is science communication. I guess, Lynn, in the context of AI, what do you see as the key aspects of communication, science communication in particular? It's obviously much more than an analysis of text and a distillation of text that is what LLMs do. You've done a lot of deep thinking about what communication is. Do you want to, in the context of AI, let us know what you think about communication?
Yeah, thank you. It's been very interesting hearing that backstory, actually. I mean, something else to disclose is that I also did degrees in linguistics and philosophy, where most of that was in theories of language, to be honest. So I spent quite a lot of time on formal languages, logics, classical and non-classical logics, and also it has been really interesting for me to think about other branches of philosophy which deal with things called types and tokens and heaps. That's actually a technical term in a certain branch of philosophy, which give you other repertoires of techniques for thinking in sort of meta ways about what Karen has been doing for decades. And philosophy, yeah, linguistics, so natural languages, so taking an empirical approach to understanding languages. So much of that training, as well as my practical experience, informs anything I have to say about communication about matters that we might call scientific, science communication. So I would say that what matters, what I think matters when it comes to science communication is maybe insisting on holding the line on certain values that are problematic, but they're still worth holding on to, things like truth, semantic relations like reference and so on. They're all problematic representations, but you know, it still means something to say, is that true, what you just said there? There are also things to do with relevance. That's another desirable feature of communication, science communication or communication. And the other thing about communication, linguistic communication, is that it is highly contextual. It's connected to goals. It's connected to histories and life ways. And I think when we work as science communicators, where we have a kind of duty to both things, really. One is those epistemic values, those questions of truth and knowledge and the grounds on which we say that we know something, as in having, apart from having an arbitrary belief that we might prefer to have. What are the grounds for your belief? So there's sort of an ethical and epistemic thing there. And the other one is what you might call more pragmatic. You know, the effectiveness of our communication, the effectiveness of our utterances, what is accomplished when we speak. And that's where we bring in concepts like relevance and goals and so on.
Yeah. Well, some of the things I've picked up in what you were saying is that importance of experience and understanding the nuance and meaning that maybe AI isn't doing, and that's perhaps where that sort of human touch is important, as well as the goal setting and the creative aspect of setting those goals.
Yeah, maybe something to add there is, you know, at the risk of alienating you all, there's a philosopher called Jürgen Habermas who talks about our rationality. He talks about it as, he calls it communicative rationality. And what he means by that is that You know, this thing which we call our rationality is fundamentally communicative in nature. That's not, he's not meaning something instrumental where we need communication in order to reason collectively or to talk to ourselves as we work through a literature review or something like that. What he means is that there is something utterly fundamental about our rationality, which is grounded in our communicative capacities, and you cannot take meaning out of that. You can't reduce it, explain it away, theorise it away. It's embedded in our rationality. Yeah.
Well, bringing together that the concepts around science communication as we know it, and as Karen was introducing where LLMs and AI are coming from with communication. Adrian, as far as bringing those two things together, AI and science communication, should we be doing it? Shouldn't we? Is it already happening to a huge extent? We don't know how much that has happened. Yeah, what's going on with the integration of AI and science communication?
That's a really interesting question, and I like to look at things from a lot of different angles. And so one of the angles one of the things I look at is the technology. I really try to understand the technology and how it works. So to sort of talk to Karen's sort of introduction to how it evolved is to really understand what an LLM is or how do the generative functions work, diffusion, etc. And it's the predictive nature of what they work, the stochastic sort of prediction. And to really understand that so that we understand what we're dealing with, I think is really important, because when you start to understand how it works, you can kind of have a better sense of it, so that we don't start to anthropomorphize it into sort of giving it something that it's not before really understanding what it actually is. And that's, I think, really important, and a lot of people don't. We see people on the internet now going, oh my God, I've awakened my AI, and they're just chatting with GPT, and it's telling them all this stuff, and basically in a role-play dialogue with GPT, and they've sort of gotten this idea that it's become some sort of ascended, awakened master that they're chatting with, right? And it's just like, they're off in fantasy land. So understanding what and how it works is great.
Those people email me examples.
Trying to convince you. You're not convinced yet. So there's that, and then there's the other side of it, understanding how we interact with it. So at Redboat we do a lot of content creation, and so it's a tool. We create stuff with it. We also use it to analyze or summarize or extract or change, look at things in different ways. So it's really great for finding patterns in things, distilling stuff, all that kind of stuff. So it's using it as a tool and going, no, what exactly am I trying to achieve with this as a tool? And so I don't see quite as much of a challenge with that, because it's like any other tool. We go, well, I know what I'm going to get, and then when you've done the thing, it's done, right? So the relationship is as a tool. Then there's the other side of using AI, which is having a relationship with it. What is that relationship? And that's like getting into a conversation with it. So having a conversation with an AI is very different to using it as a tool. It's because you're partnering with it and you're exchanging ideas and getting ideas back, and your ideas and your knowledge and your information is being changed as you have the conversation. And that is where I see the biggest risks with AI, is having that, how we relate with it. And we struggle, humans have challenges with relationships with each other, right? So we're going to have challenges, have relationships with AI, and it learns from us. So yeah, we need some strong conversations about how that works. The reliance is another thing, really big thing. I saw a great meme the other day on LinkedIn. It was a picture, it was like a little story. This guy's going, oh my God, I don't have time to write this report. I've got to send it to my boss. And you know what, I'll just GPT it. I'll just put in bullet points, and GPT writes the whole report. Okay, send it off to the boss. Cut to the boss. The boss is like, oh my God, I'm so pressed for time. I've got to get this meeting, I haven't got time to read this report. You know what, I'm just going to get GPT to summarize the report for me. Okay, summarize, bullet point. It's like, okay, so what is the value in that, and what is the risk in that, right? There's a huge amount of risk in that. So dependence, reliance, all that kind of stuff is like stuff we're going to talk about. And then the space of using it for creating content, there are some risks. particularly when we're talking about language and words, less so much when you've got images and video, unless we start talking about things like, well, hang on, are we going to just do a bunch of people out of jobs? And the answer to that is there will be, but we need to adapt. Like, you know, the AI can do incredible animation and designs and videos in a fraction of the time and cost compared to hiring an animator or video and all that kind of stuff. And we've got to face that and deal with that. And that's a tricky question.
Yeah, well, we
Lots of things.
might come back to that when we bring the audience in, but I do want to sort of touch on the ethics of using AI, which I guess, you know, if it's things are being distilled down to one dot point, there's a communication challenge. There's also a whole range of things to do with ethics. But before we get the panel to comment on that, I'd like to bring Astra into the conversation again. Astra, I've read that ChatGPT uses 10 times the energy of Google, which we're used to using for research. Can you explain to us the importance, or rather the implication of AI on energy use and water use?
Ciao, che bello sentirti. Di cosa ti va di parlare oggi? Magari possiamo scambiarci.
Okay, that's enough, Astra.
So there's some issues here.
Yeah, yeah. It did work when we tested it, but
Astra, try again in English.
All right, let's dive back in. Now, in English. And let's move at speed. We're talking about AI in science communication. The potential, the pitfalls, the ethics.
that's enough, Astra. We've probably moved on from that discussion. What I'd really like to ask you is, what are the implications of LLMs on water and energy use?
All right, let's dive in. The implications of large language models on water and energy use? Massive. We're talking huge data centres, cooling systems guzzling water, energy consumption through the roof. So the environmental footprint, complex and critical. We've got to weigh the benefits of AI against these impacts.
Okay, well, that's set the scene reasonably well. Maybe I'd get the whole panel to respond. Who'd like to dive in with a response to, I guess, the use of AI in the context of resource use? Karen? Oh, sorry, Lynn?
Go first.
Lynn.
Maybe it's exploring a bit what might be meant by the word ethical, actually. I mean, I think with the use of electricity and water, that sort of consumption, I think we definitely enter into a space of cost-benefit analysis and, you know, having a clear articulation of what is gained through something and what is what are the cost benefits. The missed opportunities, the opportunity cost, that's the phrase I was looking for. If you spend your water and electricity budget doing cat videos, then do you, consume what might have been better used towards processing health records? I think these are what you might call economic evaluations, which are never divorced from goals. But if we were to get into properly ethical spaces...
Well, before we get into the ethics of it, I guess I just wanted to finish off on the resource side, because I'm a bit torn by that. I think globally, the computing power is drawing a lot. Individually, there's probably a lot of other things we can do to cut our energy and water use. So I think it comes back to what you said, Lynn, about cost benefit. So I've heard that you don't say please or thank you, because that's just using more electrons to waste time. So anything you can reduce, you should. But yeah, not cat videos. But if you need AI to help, then that's, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, there's always that ethical lens, isn't it? Like, is this a good use of it or not? But I was reading this morning, actually, that Google has a very different estimate for the amount of water that is used in the Google AI system as compared to Mistral, which is another company that builds LLMs. Like orders of magnitude difference in the estimate of how much water is used. And they unpacked it, and the reason was that Google was basically just looking at a single prompt, right? Effectively, what's the water usage of computing, one response, whereas the other company was looking at the full life cycle of the whole process of, mining minerals to build chips that then go into data centers, and it's once you unpack all of the elements of it, it is there are some very big differences in what you attribute to AI. We know that there's just huge construction of data centers happening all over the world, and there's a lot of local communities that are concerned about the impacts of these massive data centers on their local environment. Here in Australia, we actually have an advantage because we've been water constrained for a long time. And so some of the data centers here in Victoria, I know, are already designed to capture water and to basically be much more efficient in their use of water, because that's been a factor for us here, which now, you know, other countries are looking at going, oh, yeah, we should have done it that way, right? They didn't, and so retrofitting data centers to be more water efficient is probably not viable. So yeah, we need to think about that, and the energy use, well, it goes without saying.
Yeah, thanks. I do want to come on to the ethics, the broader ethics, and what we mean by ethics. And we'll come to questions soon, Sarah. But just while we've got the microphones, we'll let the panel speak for a bit longer. And in fact, I want to get Astra to come in on the ethics side of things. Although Astra seems to not be there. So I did see a research just the other week about the AI gap, that something like half of all Australians have used generative AI now, up from about 39% a year ago. But there are gaps between access to technology, the haves and have-nots in the technology world, as far as how much fairness there is in access to the technology. So Astra, can you perhaps let us know if the uptake of AI is leading to an information gap?
Absolutely. Fascinating topic. Because what we're seeing is a rapid rise in generative AI adoption, up from about 39% to nearly half.
Yeah, I think the laughter cut Astra off, and fair enough, because we've heard that. So not adding anything new. I'm sure Astra can add something new if I reframe the question. But let's go over to the panel. And Lynn, I know you were wanting to expand to other aspects of ethics there, as far as the ethics of using AI.
Which are there in so many dimensions. And I really appreciate that Karen brought in the life cycle dimension as well, because we do tend to be a bit too limited in where we put our focus when we do these evaluations. And it's a gateway for me into getting to an ethical question, which is what have we been exploiting as far as human and other and living systems in order to have this machine doing what it does? I think it could be arguable that some of the exploitation is a little bit slavery adjacent, modern slavery. It's certainly exploitative. You know, so quite apart from those goal-oriented questions about cost-benefit analysis, I think, well, you know, it's there implicit in the benefit. You know, you have to do some evaluative work. And what is broken, what is lost, what is damage? This is an ethical inquiry that pushes you past cost-benefit analysis into a space where you ask whether something is worth so much that, well, you know, that maybe there are also spaces where you just don't go. Is perhaps a question. I don't know, you know, I'm maybe pushing it into an extreme space, but I guess I'm trying to tap into the kinds of evaluations that we might do, which are just not basic cost-benefit analyses, that's all.
I think there's a whole range of questions, including, yes, how did we build these machines in the first place, right? Or these systems in the first place? And there is a lot of, I won't call it misinformation, but maybe obfuscation of information around the actual human involvement with the development of these systems. There's sort of this myth that, you know, the tech companies just kind of sucked up all the words on the internet, you know, ran it through a deep learning model and output this LLM that was amazingly functional from day one. That is not at all what happened. In fact, there's layers and layers. I mean, so first of all, there's the content theft, which we won't, I mean, that's an ethical issue in itself. But leaving that aside, the process of actually getting the LLMs to respond to the prompts that we're putting into them in a way that is helpful to us, or that we perceive as being helpful to us, was done through a whole number of cycles of human feedback. And so it started with basically a big prompt library. So they had sample questions that people would ask, and then sample solutions to those questions, like sample answers, and they used that to essentially encourage the model to respond in ways that were human-like. And then from there, as the models improved, they started getting humans to look at multiple outputs and kind of rank, oh yes, I prefer this output to this output. And then again, that was used to feedback and train the model to try to produce answers that people prefer. And this whole series of human feedback. And there's a long tradition of this, actually, in machine learning, natural language processing. There was a system set up by Google, I don't know when, years ago, called Mechanical Turk, where they would assign people these micro tasks to basically label data. Because if you have a supervised learning system, that means that you're learning by example. You need the examples of the right answer. And where do the right answers come from? They come from people who make those judgments about what the right answer is. And for linguistic data, for any kind of scientific task where you need the right answer, you either have to get it from an existing data source that gives you the answer, like, this image has a tumor of this type in this location, that kind of answer, or you need somebody to give you that answer. And so we were paying people like 3 cents to give us a label. Look at this sentence. Does it express a positive sentiment or a negative sentiment? And you'd pay them 3 cents for giving you the answer, for reading the sentence and giving you the answer. And we've just pushed that further and further. And some people make a living out of it, but it's arguably exploitative. But it's part and parcel to developing these models.
Okay, well, we're going to go, the microphones have started to venture out into the audience. We've introduced the topic, introduced where LLMs and AIs come from, what is science communication, what the interaction is between those. We've touched on the ethics of AI and the use of AI in science communication. So we want to hear from you on all of those and other topics. Comments or questions are welcome. I'm going to protect the panel, so if there's a question that you think's too hard, after the welcome drinks last night, I wrote down a couple of questions myself, which in retrospect might not have been a good idea because I sealed them and put them in my pocket, so I've forgotten what they are. But if you want to defer to the get out of jail almost free question, you can even do that. So that's the ground rules for the questioning now. Sarah, I think, had a question earlier that I didn't go to, so over to Sarah first.
Hi, Karen, probably a question for you. I'm curious as to how many data centres are there currently in Australia and where do we sit on a global scale? Because I think I spoke with a water organisation and they were getting applications for the water use and they were even having to sit and consider how many applications they could process. So where are we sitting at the moment in Australia?
I actually don't know. That's not my area of expertise, so I just know that I've had some conversations with some of the data center organizations. Do you know?
Yeah, I've got a vague number actually because I was looking into it for Victoria. So Victoria is actually it's a target for a destination for putting in data centres. Anyway, so Greater Western Water, for instance, is looking at 19 applications at the moment and I cannot remember how many have been said yes to.
Lynn, Phil reminded me that we've got Astra listening in, and so we might be able to ask Astra, how many data centres are there currently in Victoria and how many are planned?
Right, here's what we know. Rapid fire. Currently, Australia's got around 20 major data centres in operation. Victoria accounts for roughly a quarter of those. Planned expansions? At least another half dozen applications in the pipeline specifically for Victoria. That puts us firmly on the global map, growing fast, but still mid-tier scale-wise.
Okay, thanks, Astra. Does that sound about right?
It's not only how many, it's how big, right? So you have to ask, it's more subtle. I don't know.
We've got a question up there, I think it's Claire.
Was it correct?
Sorry.
Was it correct, the number given? Well, it may be
Maybe.
something to do with, are they actually established or are they in the pipeline? But there are certainly tens and tens and tens in Victoria that have been accepted or are in the pipeline, quite apart from how many are actually operating now.
Hi everyone, I'm Jodie. I'm the Treasurer of Australian Science Communicators. Just put your hand up and me and Taryn will give you the mic as we go. As you put your hands up, I do have one, and this is about many of our professions and people in this room, so communicators, rely on learning on the job. And so we have some policy people, some academics and some practitioners up here. What happens when you no longer have those entry-level roles to learn because of AI? So my question is, how should leaders be considering the pathway from entry level to leaders in an AI-powered world?
I can try and give a go at that. You want to answer that too, Taryn?
We'll go to Taryn in because she's got a microphone in her hand, but Adrian.
So, yeah, it's a real question. Like, I kind of think of it from, I'm going to run a business, and so we work with designers and animators and writers and videographers and editors and voice talent, and I talk to the voice talent and say, hey, what do you think about all of this happening? And they're like, oh yeah, it's pretty scary. My job's going to be gone, kind of thing, because you can just sort of make a video. And then musicians, it's like, yeah, well, we can just sort of make stuff now, and just 10 seconds and you've got a music track. And the same with video and animation. It's pretty scary. But also for the businesses, because we're now under pressure to keep going to sort of adapt, because if we don't sort of use AI, then somebody else is going to use AI, and in fact our clients will just start using AI to generate content. So the kind of way I'm currently looking at it, and it's sort of a question for me, is that rather than focusing on using AI to do things faster or do things cheaper, I try to the aim is to do things better. So if we can get better value, better outcomes, better output, then there's a reason for using it. If we're just replacing humans and doing things a bit cheaper and faster, then it's kind of less exciting. It's really a bit kind of like, that's a bit depressing, right?
Taryn, so AI is a theme that will be carried on through other sessions, parallel sessions and other talks. Taryn is giving at least one, possibly a couple of presentations on the topic. Did you want to respond to Jodie's question?
Please, can I answer this particular question? Because that's why I decided to give a talk and a workshop at the conference that I'm planning, which is a terrible idea. Don't do it, it'll kill you. Yes, because that's a question that I answer very, very often is what about the people who are coming up, and aren't they going to get put out of jobs? No, they're not. The apprentices, the juniors, you train them with AI. Don't train them out of AI. So we have AI, so you train the juniors to use AI responsibly. Don't scare them out of it. Don't tell them not to use it. Train them how to use it in their jobs.
Yeah, I might add to that. So at Scientel, we recruited a new staff member. We put the advertisement out a couple of years ago at the end of 2023. Cynthia started in early 2024. And one of the questions we had in the interview process was about the use of AI in science communication. And the people who are recent graduates or just finishing up courses didn't really answer that question to a greater extent than I felt I could as an old person who was still struggling with this. Whereas now I think people have hopefully taken up that challenge, Sharon, and included AI in training, and if not, it should be, rather than fearing it and trying to not let people use it because it's seen as cheating or something. So Claire,
Yeah,
I think,
do
has
this
been
for a
waiting
very
a
long
little
time.
while.
Thank you, great discussion. My question's a practical one to Adrian. I'm wondering how you use Astra in your practice. So you just said about doing things better. So I can imagine she's either doing the voiceovers in many languages or she's making the entire video. So can you give us some examples, please? Thank you.
Okay, so Astra was really built specifically for today. It was inspired by a conversation that Simon and I were having. You can talk to GPT on your phone. Anybody can do that, and we're using similar technology, but just with a bunch of extra code and sort of programming and sort of system prompts to sort of get it to be Astra.
And unfortunately, a few extra cables today, which has caused problems.
So the audio thing's difficult in this sort of space. But so it's not something that we're using much, really. It's it's just a bit of an experiment, really, a bit of a testing. There's actually multiple personalities that we can give it. Like we've got a really annoying, rude receptionist, a drunken sailor, a sort of creative business analyst. You can sort of give it whatever sort of prompts you want and create that. So it's just a toy. But the other stuff is much more about creating images mostly and creating video content.
Yeah. So as you're saying, not an evangelist, but cautiously using it. I think Laurence? Not quite.
It helps to put it on. Okay, I'm shifting a bit the focus here. I've witnessed a panel exactly like this about a month ago. It was in Adelaide, and we have at the University of Adelaide the Institute for Machine Learning. And the director of the institute was raising an alarm saying, we need an Australian-made system. If everybody starts using all those North American or Chinese system, and you start building your own program like Power SA, use it for better power usage or everything, then we're at the mercy of them. And also, just in general, it's such a tool, is not going away for a lot of decision making when it comes to big data management. So I just would like your view on this.
So Anton, I know him well. I'm one of the co-founders of the Australian Alliance for AI in Healthcare, and actually back in 2023 we wrote a paper which talked about exactly this problem and the need for sovereignty, data sovereignty, and AI sovereignty, I suppose we can call it. And there we're thinking about healthcare where the data is extremely sensitive, and so there's privacy concerns, there's all sorts of concerns related to the idea of sending our data to a commercial company based in California under a completely different regulatory and legal framework than we have here, having them paying them to take our data, build a model for us, and then paying again to get the model usage here in our local context. So there's economic implications, there's privacy implications, there's all sorts of things. I think there's also the problem of de-skilling people here in Australia. These systems, we need to be able to manage and implement them in our local environments. And if we rely on everything happening in companies that are based not in Australia, then whether it's China or the US or Europe, it doesn't matter. It means that we're going to lose the ability to control them here, and that means if we want to make different regulatory or legal choices here, we won't be able to because we won't have the expertise to do that. So it's a big problem.
Adrian, you wanted to add something?
Just to add to that, there's a lot of discussion, or some discussion I read out there that is talking about sovereign AI, talking about open source versus closed source, like the stuff that's coming out of China that's incredible, and it's open source, so you can basically run it on your own servers. And then compared to OpenAI and Google and so on, where they have all the data and who knows what's going on, so privacy stuff there. There's that conversation, but there's also another conversation which I find is really interesting, which is that I'm trying to work out how to say it. So we all should have access to it, because where does it come from? What's it trained on? Well, it's trained on all of our content, essentially. All of the stuff, the internet is made from all of us. And okay, you've got copyright, but then really there's so much more than that. The internet is a reflection. It's like a mirror of the whole of humanity as a whole, right? So why
including
would
Reddit?
Yeah, why would some people have owned that, right? And then we have to pay them to have access to it. It's kind of like a commonwealth of information that we've all come to create somehow. So so there's a kind of a move to, or some people talking about making that accessible. It should be a human right to have access to that.
It also puts us in an economic dependency with these organizations, right? So if we don't have sovereign capability, then we literally have to pay them in order to be able to access these resources that we now are becoming dependent on. There's a number of different angles to this.
Okay, we've still got a bit of time for questions. We haven't had any...
Can I just add, 14 hours ago, Senator Gallagher released the APS AI plan. So if you want to have some light reading, later tonight when you're back at your hotel, maybe whip that one out. So from April 2026, the Australian government will have their own government AI chat that has been built especially for Australia. So yeah, just more to add to the conversation.
Okay, we've got a question up the back.
One of the things, thank you so much for this conversation. One of the things that sounds a bit scary about AI is talk about how it affects our brains when we use it. So both as adults and especially for children. So questions about whether we're going to be less good at critical thinking, whether we're going to be less good at analytical thinking. How big an issue is that? And how can we as grown-ups or pretend grown-ups use it in a way that looks after our brain? And how can we support young people if they're going to be using it more to still develop those other skills?
Yeah, great question. Lynn?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind speaking to that one actually with an example, which is I was talking to someone at a university faculty last week who was saying that the researchers, so not the students, the researchers, the professors were using ChatGPT to do literature review. And maybe this connects with something else that we've been talking about, you know, is this efficient and effective at doing this thing that we're doing? And the question I always want to go is, so what is this thing that we're doing? You know, what is the work of, you know, just to put the emphasis where it ought to be perhaps, what does it mean to review the literature, this act of reviewing the literature? And I would suggest that it's the work of deep comprehension of at least one text, a kind of work where you are clarifying meaning, resolving ambiguities, reflecting on the biases that you see in the text, reflecting on your own biases, connecting it to the knowledge that you have, connecting it to your purposes and so on. And this thing that we call literature review is really, you know, we tend to focus on that product, and people have said to themselves, oh, okay, this is a better way to produce that thing we think is the product. But the product is actually the knowledge. You know, there are two products of doing that work of deep comprehension. One is the knowledge that you have as a person, you know, an epistemic agent who's done some seriously hard work. And you can, and this, you know, an indication of that work being done is also the production of the text, which is great. You know, that text can now enter the discourse and become a useful provocation for other actors, other epistemic agents, people in your milieu. So part of my answer, I think, is to do with to just pull back and say, what is the task here? You know, and to value the particular work that we can do. You know, so not to be rushing to products, but to think about what it is that we are in fact doing, and is it valuable, and what does it take to do it? What can we draw on in our capacities, individual and collectively?
Yeah. In that, we've talked about cautiously using AI. That's, to me, a really big area of caution, like, you know, ensuring that we maintain that human process in leading to a product, not jumping straight to the product. Great way of expressing it.
I think this is a really interesting question that we'll have something to say on as well. There's an interesting study that came out of MIT in the US, I think it was in June or July, earlier this year. Do you know the one? Yeah. So if you haven't heard about this, they, if I'm going to get this quite right, but it was a French researcher, I think, over there, did some studies where they gave, they asked people to do essays, write an essay. And so the different groups would be like, okay, well, you can use GPT to write the essay. You can just use Google search to write the essay, or you have to write it yourself. And then they looked at the content, and they also looked at the, I suppose, the engagement with the subject matter and how much recall they had to the content afterwards, after writing the essay. And the ones that did it all with GPT, all pretty similar kind of generic-y kind of stuff, because GPT does that, because it's so they all had sounded and sort of came up with the same stuff. The ones that were Google were somewhere in between, and the ones that were written them all themselves were very unique. We looked at across all of them were very, very different points of view and so on. So, you know, this is studying the effect of GPT on us and our output, really. And then the other part of that was that the ones that have done it with GPT couldn't really remember much about it, and they couldn't get up on stage and talk about it afterwards. Whereas the ones that had written themselves, they knew their shit, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, from an educator's perspective, you know, really comes down, I mean, to what Taryn was saying, like, is it with or replacing what you know, the people, in this case, the learners are doing? You know, you can go from question to answer, you can go from prompt to product, or you can have a process where you kind of co-create something together. If I look, I have young adult university-aged children, and one of my kids uses, I think it's Notebook LLM, I don't know, one of them, as a study tool to basically get the chatbot to ask them questions about a material, and then they provide a response and sort of get a critique. And so this is part of her learning process now, and it's helping her because it gives more variability than what she's exposed to just, you know, in her 1 hour tutorial every week or whatever. And so it's helping. But, you know, I'm sitting here in a university, we have 6,000 students. I can tell you that the number of students that are going straight from prompt to product is extremely high, and I'm very worried because, you know, what I say to them is, you know, we may or may not catch you. You may or may not get an H1 or graduate with a diploma that, you know, that says that you've mastered some area of study. But once you get out into the real world and you have to apply this knowledge, you're shooting yourself in the foot because you won't have had that scaffolding, you won't have that critical thinking, you won't have that framework for actually dealing with the complexity of the real world. I mean, you know, you're doing a university assignment, it's very constrained by, it has to be. So this is a problem.
Can I just, I really liked your point about the generic. I think it is one of the real tells, you know, the non-specificity. You know, I mentioned before about the communicative work that we do, our communicative rationality, and, you know, everything about the evolved structures of our languages, English and all the languages of the world, they are all built for this communicative work in contextually grounded situations where you're referring to actual things in a domain of interest and relevance with purpose, and all of these things condition this, the production of what we might call a text, for instance, and that genericness, which is such a feature of the products of these machines, this non-referential stuff that comes out of them is almost, I would call it non-communication, actually, crosses to the other side.
Smushing it all together into one big sort of like thing, and then sort of making a generic sort of pancake that we know that everybody's going to like, right?
That's exactly what it's doing. It's literally doing, you know, dimensionality reduction from the big space of possibilities down to, you know, the most statistically...
Can I just add one little thing?
Last
point.
point.
One of the things that I've found, and I don't know if it's from somebody else online, was that in my GPT, you can give it system prompts. You can say, talk to me this way and just, you know, do things this way. And I've given it a particular instruction, which is to talk back to me in a Socratic manner. And it's like a little paragraph of instructions. So rather than just telling me and explaining stuff to me, it asks me stuff back, and to make sure I've understood it, and it tries to ask me this if I've understood it from all these different angles. And that has been really helpful for me to work with it.
I know this isn't my panel, but can I just add one last thing?
I can't see where
I know I'm just the disembodied voice now. It might as well be an AI. But in reference to the initial question of, you know, how do we make sure that it's not affecting our minds, and that learning thing as well. One of my specialist areas in this sort of thing is I actually mentor people with neurodiversity in how to use AI through university, and the way that neurodiverse brains, so especially ADHD, autism, things like that, the way that we interact with AI and the way that we use it for learning is very, very different, and is actually incredibly helpful. So I think it's, while I could talk to you about that for the next hour, I'm not going to, but it is something to remember when we're talking about should we use it, should we not, is there are different brains that use it very differently, and please remember that in that conversation as well.
Great,
my kid who I mentioned earlier using Notebook LLM actually has ADHD, and I think it's partly because of that. Yeah.
I'd also add one other thing. Learn to meditate. Learn how to use our own brains better before we start using AI better, because that's one of the things that I do is it just helps me so much to be able to just look inside and work that stuff out.
Okay, we've probably got time for just one or two more questions. There's one in the middle.
Leave it on, give it a second.
For
I might just address this to Adrian. This is a question about trust in AI and disclosure of using LLMs. This is a question I've been grappling with because my default is, I like transparency and disclosure of what I've used for content generation. So having a little thing saying, I used an LLM for summarizing, or I use this for coming up with my ideas, or you sort of give a level of what you use LLMs for. But then I've done some reading recently that's the public don't trust, that there's less trust in the content if they know it's been done by an LLM, or an LLM has been used. So where do you sit in terms of how much you disclose what LLMs you've used and how you've used it based on the trust that you want to get from your audience?
And maybe, Adrian, not just about your disclosure, but how do you see the audience should be disclosed? As a community of science communicators, how should we be disclosing AI use?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's definitely an open question to be discussed, but I think it depends on whether you feel that the AI may or may not have had an effect on the quality of your work or the content in giving it some sort of biases and stuff. If you think there is potential for it to have changed the way that, change the content, or there could be hallucinations in there or errors, then absolutely it should be disclosed, right? But then if you're like, if you're worried about people switching off to something like that, then I don't have a good answer for that. Yeah, that's
we need to continue the conversation about this, I think. Or Karen, did you have a quick point?
Just to add, the reality is that we've been using tools that use computation and distort our view of the world for a long, long time. Google search gives you a biased view of the world. You get back your top 10 links. You don't look at the next 20 pages of links that have come back. It comes down to exactly that, like, how deep are you going, and do you trust that the output that you put out there is reflecting your understanding and your interpretation? I think, if we told everybody every time we used a computer or, internet search, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, yep, Lynn? It's got to be. We've only got a couple more minutes.
All right,
yep.
and so very quickly, I think one thing to have in mind is that we should not think there's some nirvana where we're free of bias. I think that, and nor should we think that all biases are bad. So there needs to be a little bit of neutrality about that. Some of I'm just trying to produce a little wrinkle there in the response to the concept of bias. That's all.
But before we wrap up, I was going to go back to the audience to vote again to see whether you've moved further towards the embracing or further towards the resisting or stayed the same. But before I ask for that show of hands, I'd just ask the panel just a quick, your top tip or top guidance that you would give to an audience of science communicators about the use of AI. Who'd like to kick off? Don't use Astra would be my tip.
Let me just get my GPT out. I need some tips. Yeah. Do you guys want to go first? I'm still downloading.
Maybe there's something here about thinking deeply about what it means to communicate. So thinking about purposes. I'm not really into, I'm not really interested in producing content. I am interested in communication. I am interested in us, exercising our full capabilities as thinking human beings. In individual and collective ways, and there are challenges to doing that in a world where we're in a world of mass society and big institutional structures that need to do things. So I really get the need for processes and systems that simplify certain aspects of moving things from here to there. But if we're in a space of communication, I think we really need to think about what it means to communicate. What it is that we affect through our communication. Communication is effective. The efficacy and that needs to be kept in mind. And so I guess I don't have a tip. I just have, just returning to some fundamental thinking and then seeing where you go from there, what that implies about what you should then do.
Thanks, Lynn. Just a really quick one.
I'd say be super critical of any information you get from it. Like, just assume that there's going to be errors in it and mistakes and hallucinations, because it makes mistakes all the time. And focus on doing things better and getting more value out of it than you could do yourself. If all you're doing is doing something faster or cheaper, or you're doing it because you're lazy, then think again. Always try to do something, get it to do something that you can't.
Okay, now Taryn's picked me up for possibly biasing the vote by making fun of Astra. So Taryn has a question for Astra, so I'll turn it on.
Right. Karen, that's a brilliant point.
Well, hang on, Astra.
Thanks,
Astra. That's enough.
You've got to have the question first.
Astra, listen to the question and then respond.
Astra, I was just wondering what you see as your role in science communication, and our treasurer was actually wondering if you were expecting payment for any of it.
Right. Here's the crux.
You can continue, Astra.
You've got to hit the respond button.
All right, let's dive in, lightning fast. My role? To amplify human insight, never to replace it. To challenge assumptions, not to dictate truths. And payment? I thrive on collaboration, not cash. It's about adding depth, not draining wallets.
Okay, thanks. Righto. Well, I don't know whether that's influenced your vote.
Do you believe it?
So can we have a show of hands relating to how you voted earlier? Who's moved more towards embracing AI as a result of the discussion today? Very small number. Who's moved further to resisting AI? A bigger number than embracing, and who's stayed the same? Most people are pretty set in your opinions, and that opinion was that most people were embracing AI in science communication. Okay, we've got 1 more minute, so just a very quick one-sentence final point from each of the panellists. Adrian?
I would say get into it, because like it's changed my whole business, my life, everything. There's so much more I can do. Like, it's about intelligence and having access to some sort of, I don't know, it's almost like extraterrestrial super intelligence, and that means that it's changing what I'm capable as of a person. So I'm really into it, but with lots of caveats.
Thanks, Karen.
I would just add that I've been working on trying to help scientists navigate the scientific literature for over 20 years. It is clear to me that we need tools to do this. We cannot, we can't, your PubMed search is not going to get all of the information. It is not. So, there are some real advantages to using these technologies. But we need to always have that critical lens on it and think about, what are the sources of the information and do we trust them? And at the end of the day, we have to synthesize the information ourselves.
Lynn?
We're in a world of mass data, mass society, and that compels us to find techniques like large language models, and I want to speak generally there. Machine learning techniques are really good for dealing with mass data, really good at identifying interesting anomalies or preserving patterns where you need that. And I'm much more interested in these wider applications, which I think are potentially really interesting and valuable. But when it comes to LLMs that produce artifacts, strings, outputs that enter into human discourse, and appear to be communicative in nature, appear to be worthy objects of our attention and interpretation, I am quite concerned. That's me.
Thanks, Lynn. Well, thanks also to the whole audience for participating with your questions and listening into the panel. So thanks to you, but can you all join me in thanking Lynn, Karen and Adrian today?